esta mañana aquí in Fredericksburg to be with Josh Gold, the next delegate to represent this community. If we do nothing else here today, let us all commit to doing everything we can to get this guy in office. To Jacqueline and Simone, the owners of Pimenta, thank you for hosting us, bringing us all together, for contributing to the quality of life and success of this community. And to each of you, for the energy that you are bringing to this decisive, defining year. As important as 2020 is, 2019 not only sets the ground for whoever the nominee will be, and let's make this commitment as well. Whoever she or he is, we do everything we can to ensure that they defeat Donald Trump. But on this, let's make sure that 2019 in this Commonwealth is the year that we take back control, returning power to people away from corporations and political action committees and special interests to focus on the issues that are most important to us, making sure that we invest in infrastructure to reduce the traffic that we have here in this community, making sure that we pay public school educators. Making sure that 12 years and one day after 32 people were murdered at Virginia Tech, and we passed universal background checks. The future of this Commonwealth, and by extension, this country, hangs in the balance. It is your votes. We just heard from Josh. It was 73 votes that we were short last time in an election, whether intentional or not, was rigged against him. The only way to correct this in the short term is for every single one of us to show up not just on election day, but every day before that, registering our fellow Virginians. Making the commitments of our friends, our families, our neighbors, our co-workers, our classmates to show up as well. To make sure that while we still have time and the opportunity is before us, that we do everything within our power at this moment. We are counting on one another right now. This, not just for the Commonwealth, not just for Fredericksburg, for the United States of America, for this democracy 243 years into the experiment, that we can freely choose those who will represent our interests, to reflect our values and our priorities, that this can still continue, not just for another 243 years, but for another 1 year, another 2 years, in a country where too many are denied access to the ballot box based on the color of their skin. Too many are voter ID'd out of any participation in what their government looks like. We need to prevent what happened in 2017, a new Voting Rights Act in this country. We need same-day voter registration. We need automatic voter registration. We can't and we need to end racial, ethnic, and political gerrymandering in the United States of America. I've been doing a lot of talking. But if we think about it, the ability for this democracy, perhaps the single greatest mechanism to call forth the power and the genius and the innovation and the ingenuity and the service and yes, the sacrifice of our fellow Americans, it underpins all of our hopes to confront any real challenge that we have, those that we have just described, or the fact that in this country there are tens of millions of our fellow Americans who cannot see a doctor or take their child to a therapist or afford the medications that keep them alive. People crowdfunding the dollars necessary to purchase insulin, which was invented 97 years ago and given practically for free, sold for $3 Canadian to the University of Toronto to save the lives of our fellow human beings. And today, pharmaceutical companies are getting rich, pricing it out of reach of our fellow Americans who in the year 2019 are dying of diabetes, dying of the flu, dying of curable cancers, not because we have a lack of resources, but because we have a lack of political will to be there for one another at this moment in this time. One of the largest providers of mental health care services in this country today is the county jail system in this country today. Across Texas, we've had so many families who had a member with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or depression who literally got arrested on purpose because the jail was the one place they could go where they would receive the care that they needed to make life temporarily bearable for them. In my home state, our legislature has been so successful in reducing the number of family planning clinics, making it hard for a woman not only to legally obtain an abortion, but to get a cervical cancer screening, family planning help, or to see a provider in a state that has not expanded Medicaid of any kind at all. So when we talk about universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care, it means primary health care for all, mental health care for all, and every woman making her own decisions about her own body. We have to be up to that challenge. Or when we witness kids kept in cages, their mothers deported back to the very country from which they fled to save the lives of those children, exactly what you would do for your kids if faced with the same circumstances. The deadliest countries on the face of the planet today, made that way in part by the civil wars that we participated in the 1970s and the 1980s. The fact that this country, though it represents 4% of the globe's population, consumes 25% of her illegal drugs, and those drugs come from somewhere, transit through another place, and our militarization of the war on drugs, imposing this failed strategy on these other countries, has in effect hollowed out their institutions, civil society, their ability to protect their own people. When you add to that the contributing factor of climate change, and right now in the Northern Triangle, farmers can no longer grow the food that will sustain themselves and their families and their fellow countrymen. And so they are forced to flee 2,000 miles on foot atop a train known as La Bestia, or the Beast, to arrive here at their most desperate and vulnerable moment. And the way that we have chosen to receive them is in cages, is in deportations, is in unimaginable cruelty. But in this democracy, where the government is the people, and the people is the government, every day that this persists, it is on every single one of us. Take no comfort in the fact that it was ordered by one man of one party. We are Americans, and we must be up to this challenge to ensure that never again do we separate another family at our front door. That we reunite those families that have been separated already, and that we use this as an opportunity to rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image. We can continue by freeing every dreamer from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens here in this country, bringing millions more out of the shadows to contribute to their full potential, and ensuring that our immigration laws reflect our values, are written in our own image, the traditions, the strength of the United States of America. Almost the exception in world history. A nation defined not by ethnicity or race, but by our ideals. And this experiment, we turn our back on that at our own peril. El Paso, Texas, my hometown. Which, with Ciudad Juarez, forms the largest binational community in the Western Hemisphere. 3 million from 2 countries, speaking 2 languages from 2 cultures, 2 histories, joined, not separated by the Rio Grande River, forming something far greater than the sum of their parts or the number of people. In El Paso, Texas, for 20 years running, one of the safest cities in the United States of America. Our safety and our position, not despite the fact that we are a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees, but because we are a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. Our success, our strength, and yes, our safety. So if we are serious about security, it will not be purchased at the cost of $30 billion to construct a 2,000-mile long, 30-foot high wall. The walls we already have contributed to the deaths of thousands of migrants, pushed into the most inhospitable stretches of the U.S.-Mexico border, forced you and me to take our fellow Americans' farms and ranches and homes and land to build a solution in search of a problem. Last year there were 400,000 apprehensions at our border. So many of them turned themselves in. The Border Patrol agents tell me that they're arresting themselves. These asylum seekers from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. For perspective, in the second year of the George W. Bush administration, there were 1.6 million apprehensions at our border. So if there is a crisis, it is with those families who are trying so desperately to protect their children. There is no crisis in this country because of their presence. We have the resources, the means, and the laws that we should follow. Because if we don't, it will be to the lasting shame of this country, and we will face the judgment of our children and those generations that will follow us. We can still get this right. And not only must we articulate that vision of stopping the separations, reuniting the families, rewriting our immigration laws, we must call out hatred and racism where it exists, including in the highest positions of power and public trust. Mexican immigrants are not rapists and criminals. Muslims are not inherently dangerous and should be welcomed into this country. Klansmen and Nazis and white supremacists are not very fine people. The genius of this country is that we've incorporated people from every country on the planet, from every walk of life, from every tradition of faith. So whatever the differences, do not let this man divide us or make us afraid, keep us apart, make us angry. That's his strategy, to divide and conquer this country. If we can divide those differences of faith, geography, of race, how many generations you can count your family an American, or whether you just got here this morning, if we can come together, I guarantee you, we can meet and overcome any one of these challenges. Now, whether it's our immigration system, or following our asylum laws, or investing in the solutions in the Northern Triangle so families do not have to make that journey of 2,000 miles, whether it's universal guaranteed high-quality health care so every American is well enough to live to their full potential, whether it is an economy that works for all and not just the few, where you can work one job and that's enough to take care of yourself and your family and your kids. So you can take time off of work and it is paid to take care of yourself or your kids or your parents. Or if you are a woman, you are paid the same amount that a man is paid in the same job. And regardless of your sexual orientation, you are not discriminated against in the workplace. In Texas, it is legal to fire you for being gay, and that is wrong. That's why, as president, I will sign into law the Equality Act, guaranteeing the rights of women in every workplace, in every part of this country. And then, if we're going to make sure that we truly get the most and the best out of all of us, let us confront the disparate treatment of some of us. This country has the largest prison population per capita on the face of the planet. Far too many there doing time for non-violent drug crimes, including possession of marijuana, which is legal or decriminalized or medicinalized in the majority of the states of the Union. Now, Americans of all races and ethnicities and countries of national origin use marijuana at the same rate, but disproportionately people of color are stopped, are frisked, are arrested, are sent to prison, are released, and upon release have to check a box on every employment application form saying that they have a conviction, making it less likely that they get the job, are now unable to pursue higher education because they do not qualify for federally backed student loans. Their options are narrowed, their future is constrained. We as a country are doing this right now. In order to meet this challenge, we must not only end the prohibition on marijuana, but expunge the arrest records of every single person. And we must, as difficult as this is, acknowledge that this is not exclusive to our system of criminal justice. This is also in our system of healthcare, a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for women of color. A disparity in infant mortality between white America and black America that is greater today than it was in 1850, 15 years before the abolition of slavery. 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in black America. Following the wealth creation foundational to this country on the backs of those brought here in bondage, kidnapped from West Africa, to build this country whose succeeding generations were prevented from enjoying the fruits of their labor, whether it was segregation or Jim Crow or redlining that prevented the accumulation of capital and passing it on to the next generation. Or if we acknowledge that at 5 years old in the kindergarten classroom, a child of color is 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled as a white child. This is every part of American society today. If we are going to begin the work of repair, fundamental to reparation, we must have the truth, tell our shared story, accept the facts, and then make the decisions going forward to ensure that we repair the damage and stop visiting these injustices on our fellow Americans. Because we are going to need all of us to get this done. The single greatest challenge we face, a changing climate that has warmed 1 degree just since 1980 over pre-industrial revolution levels. 1 degree since 1980 owing to our own emissions, our own excesses, and our own inaction in the face of the science and the facts and the truth. We were just in Iowa, where the Missouri River flooded communities there in Nebraska and Missouri. There's 4 times the runoff in this year in the Missouri River Basin than there is on an average year. In fact, the greatest level of runoff that they've seen for as long as they've been keeping records on the Missouri River. Flooding farmers who were already underwater when it came to debt, spoiling the grain and the soybeans that they had stored that cannot find markets for as long as we're in these trade wars and impose these tariffs that are self-inflicted wounds on this country. In Houston, Texas, 58 inches of rain fell from the sky in 2017, which is the landfall record for as long as we've been keeping them in North America. And that was the third 500-year flood in just the last 5 years. These floods, the droughts through which our farmers attempt to persist, the wildfires in California and all over the world, it's bad now. It is only going to get much worse. But those scientists say there are 10 years left to us to prevent the worst of the catastrophes from befalling our kids and our grandkids and the generations that follow. Up to us to free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, to invest in wind and solar and renewable energy technologies, to ensure that we create the high-value, high-wage, high-skilled jobs that we need in this country. And today, the two fastest growing occupations are wind energy jobs and solar energy jobs. If we allow farmers to do their part by rewriting the Farm Bill to provide an incentive, allow them to make a profit by planting cover crops, pulling carbon out of the air, new technologies like precision tilling that disturb less of the carbon in the soil. In other words, if each of us does our part, if we meet this challenge not by half measures, or with only half the country, not the Democratic Party, not big cities, but all of us, then we can reassume our rightful role as the indispensable nation, convene the other powers of the planet, sign back up to the Paris Climate Agreement, and bring the world together around an otherwise intractable problem. We will not be known by our fears, and our divisions, and our differences, the smallness and the pettiness that marks so much of the national conversation and the national leadership at this moment. Instead, it is my hope, and we will all do everything within our power to achieve this, that we will forever be known by our ambitions, our aspirations, and the work, the resolve, the creativity, and the sacrifice we are willing to bring to bear in order to achieve them. For those reasons, I am running to serve you as the next President of the United States of America. And I am grateful to be with you today. I'm looking forward to answering your questions, hearing what's on your mind. Cynthia Connell right here to your right has got a microphone. Raise your hand and she'll do her best to bring it to you. Thank you, Fredericksburg, for having us out.
I'm Natasha Hasso-Smith, and I work in restorative justice here in Fredericksburg with the Office on Youth. So I work with our juveniles, and we hear about restorative justice in the media right now with the Trump administration, and I think what people don't realize is that it's at the federal level, and that we need more restorative justice at the local level. What do you think about implementing restorative justice in our schools? Because that's really the key of stopping the school-to-prison pipeline. Will you promise to put somebody on the Secretary of Education that wants restorative justice principles, that it's not the exception, but it's the rule? Because locally, we need to stop the prison-to-school pipeline.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Do you all think that we can do better than Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education? I also know, when I mentioned the disparity in treatment in that kindergarten classroom with kids who are 4 and 5 years old, we got some feedback. One of the things that we can do, beyond paying our teachers what they are worth, beyond investing in our schools, beyond starting public education not at 4 or 5 years old in kindergarten, but 3 or 4 years old in pre-K university, is we can recruit and retain teachers who look like the kids in front of them. We can make sure that we stop a schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline that begins at the youngest ages with kids who are absolutely defenseless against this system. So absolutely, yes, that will be a priority for our Secretary of Education, and we would love to work with you to make sure we get it done. Thank you.
All right, we're just turning it down a little bit.
I don't know who's got the sound, but we're feeding back.
All right. A little bit more.
All right, we'll just hold the mic a little bit further down. Here, let's pass this microphone back to her, and then you can just pass it back. Turn that other microphone off.
I'm so excited to see you. My name is Nandini. We live in Northern Virginia. We used to live in Sugar Land, Texas, and we've been following your campaign since the fall of 2017 when you came to Sugar Land, and we've been volunteering for you ever since, so excited to see you. My question today is really something fundamental to, I guess, all of us as human beings, especially those of us who look like my family, and that is about safety. And, you know, I think I went 42 years of my life never having experienced anything related to how I look. But suddenly in the fall of 2017, not one, but a series of incidents happened where we were intimidated in our own neighborhood, which is a nice neighborhood. You may be familiar with Sugar Land. It's got good schools, great area. You know, San Antonio Airport, all over the place. No matter where I went, I seemed to get into this thing. The first time in my life, I felt like I was scared because of how I looked.
Yeah.
So, two parts to my question. One is for those, especially for mothers, and for those of us who look like us, how can you give us confidence that you will beat Donald Trump in the fall of 2016? Because he is reelected, it's going to be open season on people who look like us, and I'm honestly scared. And the second part to that is, if you do win and you represent us, what specific actions will you take to help repair the damage and make us safe again?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the support. First time that we had a town hall in Houston, Texas. 2017, it was at the IBEW Hall. And I told a story that I just heard in El Paso. A third grade girl at Lyndon B. Johnson Elementary in El Paso asked us why the president didn't like her. She's Mexican American. She had internalized his description of Mexican immigrants as rapists and criminals. And you're good. And I wondered what that did to her head, to her conception of herself, to what she thought it was possible that she would be able to contribute to the greatness of this country. And as I told that story in Houston, another family pulled me aside. They said, our daughter's also in third grade. We're Muslims. She came home from school asking us the same question, whether she's in the right country or we should be living somewhere else, because the president wants to ban all Muslims from coming into the United States. Now, that third grade girl was born in the U.S., so were her parents. It would not matter to me if they were not. What is that going to do to her? The day that the president signs his Muslim ban on travel to the U.S. in February of 2017, the mosque in Victoria, Texas is burned to the ground. So it's not just that the rhetoric offends our sensibilities. It leads to actions, to practices, to policies that fundamentally change the character of this country. Hate crimes in the United States of America are up every single one of the last 3 years. This latest incitement to hatred and violence, posting a video, the president, on his own Twitter account, not retweeted, but formulated by his own team, that conflates a Muslim member of Congress, Representative Ilhan Omar, duly elected by her constituents in Minnesota, with the terrorists who perpetrated the attack on 9/11. At the end of the video saying, "We will never forget." So now her life is in danger, or in greater danger than it was before. But so are the lives of other Muslims in this country. You've got to really search Western democratic history for another country that sought to exclude all people of one religion, or to describe them as inherently dangerous to the future of that country. Another place on another continent that would describe human beings as animals or an infestation. That language is incredibly dangerous and deadly. You don't get kids in cages until you start talking about them in that way. You dehumanize them so it is okay for those public officials to do those things. They justify it in their mind because the president said so. So, you ask a really critical question. If there are 4 more years of Donald Trump, can we recover? Can we maintain this country and our democracy? So we make the agreement that we're going to do everything in our power, not only to win the nomination, but to do so in a way that compromises no one else's ability to defeat Donald Trump in the battle of 2020. We will not demean, we will not demean anyone, we will not descend into personal or petty or even partisan politics. We will seek to elevate both the conversation, the voices of our fellow Americans, and this country, because in addition to defeating him in November, this country has to be brought together. And the way that we will talk about it is the way that I talk about America, about Texas, about my hometown, the very source of our strength, our success, and yes, let's say this over and over again, our security is the fact that people have chosen us to be here in this country, to contribute to our shared success and our greatness, and they have. Let's tell that story. Appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
It's really great to see you. My name is Angela. I guess my question is, given how huge of a hurdle we have getting Donald Trump out of office, how do we ensure that we unite all of the Democrats together, and not just Democrats, but independents and everybody else, to get him out of office? There's so many people who think that we are kind of fractured, some too far to the left, some too far to the center. So what can we do to ensure that we're all facing a united front?
Thanks for the question.
Earlier, Josh was mentioning that we had run in Texas for the United States Senate. And along the way, we visited every single one of the 254 counties in our state. No matter how big or how small, how red or how blue. If you're blue, we were not going to take you for granted. We're going to assume anything. We would show up and listen to you. If you were red, we would not write you off, as you have been written off by our party for decades in some cases. I went to Archer City in Archer County, had a town hall at Burns Cafe with 12 or 13 people. Congressman Lyndon Baines Johnson, who had just descended out of the sky in his Senate campaign helicopter onto the grounds of the Archer County Courthouse, walked over to the American Legion Hall and listened to those whose votes he was going to ask for, who he sought to represent and serve in the Senate. This guy said, you know, my dad lived in Archer City his entire life. I've lived in Archer City my entire life. You were the first candidate for Senate from either party to show up here in 70 years. So, where Democrats fear to tread, Republicans don't have to show up. There's no contest in November. Their constituents functionally do not have representation. They're not answering questions like these at town hall meetings. They're not accountable. They're not gaining the benefit of the best ideas or criticism from their constituents. So we showed up everywhere, listened to those who came to different conclusions on the issues that we all care about, but tried to find the common ground and the common path to do the common good for this country. And in the process, though we came up 2.6% short in that race, we gained more votes than any Democrat in the history of the state of Texas. We were able to help flip the House of Representatives, 2 new Democratic members from Texas in seats long held by Republicans, change the composition of the state legislature in our state. Young voter turnout up 500% from the last time. And in Harris County, not too far from you, Houston, Texas, 17 African American women elected to judicial positions of power and trust, literally changing the face of criminal justice in our country's most diverse city. So, My case is, if we show up for everyone, don't write anybody off, show up both with the courage of our convictions, as we did today, but a willingness to listen and learn and incorporate what we hear into how we campaign and how we serve. That's the way that we not only defeat Donald Trump, that's the way that we bring this country together. Thank you.
I know there's a lot of questions, but I'm really sorry these are going to be our last two.
Hi, my name is Jane. I work in Pennsylvania. And the last couple of years, there's been a farce of this great tragedy that's happening, and we're under this huge attack. And it's funding is coming from other sources where it shouldn't to go towards the border. What are you going to do to help Flint, Michigan get clean water? Will you put the same efforts and dramatic energy into a problem that doesn't exist, into a problem that does exist?
The answer is yes. And I'll tell you how we can do this. Beyond doing the right thing, following the moral imperative, to help people in the wealthiest, the most powerful, the most technologically advanced country on the planet be able to drink the water that comes out of their tap in Flint, Michigan, we can connect the residents of that community with those that I just met in Denmark, South Carolina, where for 10 years, they've been treating the public water with something akin to a pool cleaner, which is toxic to human beings. That water system is now spoiled. They'll have to dig new wells, replace the infrastructure. It will cost $15 million, and the property tax base in Denmark, South Carolina cannot support that. The state legislature has not found the will, and so yes, it will entail federal leadership. Denmark, by the way, is just outside of Sweden and Norway, South Carolina. Which makes me think there was a Viking invasion of the Carolinas at some point. We're going to find out the history on that. I mentioned going to every county in Texas. The reddest county not in Texas, but in the United States, King County, the county seat of which is Guthrie, which I believe voted for Trump 96% in the last election, is one of 50 water systems in the great state of Texas where you cannot drink the water. And that county judge in King County, Texas, who probably did not vote for me in the last election, wanted to share with me that he wanted to see some urgency from candidates and those holding positions of public trust to make the investment in infrastructure in his community, communities throughout Texas, communities in Michigan and South Carolina and in Virginia too. There are $4 trillion in outstanding infrastructure needs in this country. It is needs that alleviate traffic, provide for mass transit, improve access to broadband internet in rural America, but also allow us to drink the water that is coming out of our tap. In the face of that, our president and the Republican majority in Congress at the time, with these $4 trillion in needs, $21 trillion in debt, cut a $2 trillion tax break that flowed to corporations and the very wealthiest in this country at a time of historic cash on hand for those corporations and historic divide between the wealthiest and the poorest in the United States of America. I want to make sure that we reverse the worst of those cuts, restore funding to communities, to people, to infrastructure, to Flint, Michigan, and every community where you cannot drink the water today. Thank you for the question.
Well, that's in your my name is Shawnee Peterson, and I am the president of the Young Democrats at the University of Mary Washington. We are so happy to have you here in Fredericksburg, and I just wanted to give you a present. This is our yearly t-shirt. Every year we have a student design, one of our members design our t-shirt for the year. I designed this shirt. I picked out the quote on the back. I thought you would appreciate it. It's the quote on the back of the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. Envy, the homeless tempest cost to me. I left my lamp beside the golden door. I hope that you will go on to embody this message either in Texas or at the nationwide level. We will be standing with you. Thank you.
We're going to take one more question.
Last question right here.
Buenos días. Gracias por visitar nuestra comunidad. Thank you for visiting Fredericksburg. I am a radiation therapist at Mayor Washington Healthcare. Several years ago, I immigrated from El Salvador, and I am now able to serve this community because of the many opportunities that I've had. Throughout my time here, I've witnessed the growth of many individuals who are truly talented, and unfortunately, their potential has been very limited due to their legal status. I do believe that they deserve the same opportunities that I've had. These dreamers, I too have a dream. I do want to believe that they can have the opportunities that I had and that they can contribute to their maximum potential. My question to you is in regards to the programs for DACA and TPS. Throughout many years, it has been unsuccessfully on both sides of the aisle to be able to pass any legislation. What plan do you have specifically that you would work with Congress? Congress that would probably have an opposition to your administration. How would you successfully be able to work with them to be able to bring all these talented individuals out of the shadows and be able to contribute to this community and to all the communities in the country? Muchas gracias.
One question about dreamers, and maybe the larger spirit of the question about immigrants who are here in our community, in our country, have been here in some cases for decades. In many cases, working jobs that no one else is going to work. In many other instances, investing in the economic success. I remember holding a town hall meeting in Goldthwaite, Texas, in a restaurant that had just opened up the week before. The owners were two immigrants from Jalisco, Mexico, who literally invested everything that they had in the world in the success of that small community, bringing life and vitality into Goldthwaite, Texas. So it was just in Storm Lake, Iowa, where immigrants have followed the meatpacking jobs that are there in abundance, doing work that no one born in Storm Lake right now is doing for whatever reason. And as they earn enough, they're opening up restaurants and bakeries and small businesses and employing more people in Storm Lake. Any way you measure it, in economic growth, in jobs created, immigrants add, do not take from this economy. In the ways that we cannot measure. Who we are, our quality of life, the story that we tell ourselves and our kids about what America represents. Whether it was my dad talking about the O'Rourkes who in the 19th century fled famine in Ireland and came to the one country that could take them in, or those perhaps temporary protected status beneficiaries from El Salvador who came a century later to this country, whether it was Ireland and Europe, Central America or South America, or Africa or Asia or any part of this planet, the very presence of those who chose us, who call this place home, has made us better. The best way to reflect that value in our laws is again to make those dreamers U.S. citizens, to find the common cause with Republicans. And this is an idea that enjoys bipartisan support right now. It's hard for me to find, although there are a few Republican members of Congress who would want to deport more than 1 million people from this country back to a country whose language they do not speak, where they may no longer have family, where if they are successful against those long odds, that success will accrue to that place, that country, not Fredericksburg, not Virginia, not the United States of America. So whether it is the moral imperative or our own self-economic interest that we follow, the right thing to do is to free those dreamers, their parents, the original dreamers, to restore TPS status to anyone who's threatened with losing it, and to make sure that we raise the visa caps in this country so that when we ask someone to get into a line to join their family or to work a job, that it does not stretch 20 years or longer as it does now. Let's rewrite these laws. Let's do it together, not as Democrats, but as Americans. Thank you for asking the question.